So, River, why the switch from being a powerful lawyer at the Texas Capitol to becoming an intimacy coach? Because that's such a big switch.
It is a big switch. I grew up without spirituality. I was grown up, I was raised in a religion, but it didn't make sense to me. So I really was an atheist. And I had one of those big fallout moments, one of those black holes, I was in my law career and things were pretty much going well for the career and for politics. I was a super hardcore activist. And all of a sudden, it just felt like nothing had any meaning. And I sat there for like a year in a space with blankness, just like, I felt like everything about life was really stupid and boring and dumb. And like nothing got me excited anymore. I just felt like life was so meaningless. And then after a year of sitting around doing almost nothing, just waiting, what I decided was I don't want to do anything anymore that doesn't have meaning. And I'm not going to do anything else until it has meaning. So all I would do is get up and go to work and come home and just sit in my living room until waiting for something to have meaning. And it was a year of that before I literally was like, well, wait a minute, at least my sexual fantasies at least interest me, at least mildly. And at least I get a little tingly feeling in my body when I have a sexual fantasy. And then I don't know, it all just came clear to me that my fantasies have always been kinky. They've always been dominant, submissive type themes. And I typed in Austin BDSM into the computer back there in 2006 or 5, and all this stuff came up, and there was the whole kink community, and it was suddenly like, whoa, I feel something in my body, like I've got to follow this. At least something is exciting me, something is meaningful in some way, even if it is my sexual fantasy. So I went into that world and couldn't believe how wonderful it was, and how I had never spoken before about my fantasies to anyone.
Wow.
But all of a sudden I was in an environment where they were nothing,
Right.
totally not judged for it. They were mild, if anything, in that group.
Really?
Oh yeah. So it was like, wow, I'm just so relieved. I felt like I could really be myself. And then I started thinking, I wonder what other subcultures or communities are here in Austin.
Yeah.
How did I not know about these thousands of people getting together?
Yeah, I didn't know until I wrote your bio.
Really? Well, now it's like 40 or 50,000 people in Austin.
Holy moly.
In the kink world.
Oh my God.
So that was before FetLife. And so then at that point I started thinking, well, I'm going to find every subculture in Austin. Like there's got to be more stuff going on. And I did. And one of those was the Toltec path.
Oh, yeah.
And at that time, Heather Ash Amara.
Yeah, we've had her on also.
You've had Heather Ash on?
Yeah, twice.
I didn't
We love her.
see that. I didn't see that. She's so dear to me. I saw her last weekend. And when I saw her for the first time, my heart just opened.
Yeah, she has that effect.
Oh, and I spent 5 years with she and Raven apprenticing and taking every course and workshop and everything they do.
Yeah.
So
I went to her last workship in Austin.
Oh, did you? That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really deep in that community when they were here. And so I guess what I'm saying is that it was my sexuality that started the excitement and then the inquiry into what else is there. I found Ash really close to that early time. And so then my spirituality and my sexuality started blossoming together, really opening up at the same time. And so after years it was 5 years, I think, into my spiritual cleaning, that spirit gave me the message. And just like, you're here to be a sexual healer. I can remember exactly where I was. We were in ritual in Toltec. I was laying down on the floor and I remember sitting up like, oh my God, I know everything. I know everything. I know everything I need to do from now on. And since that moment, I really haven't done anything but pursue this purpose. Wow. And so I knew, I need to find a way to get the training I need. I need to find a way to start a different business. And then I'm going to need to find a way to close down this law practice. And it's all going to take a long time, but that's fine. So actually it took a few more years from that decision point to get more training, to start seeing clients, and to close the business at the law practice. But it was no competition. It was no competition because I had realized that doing divorce and custody lawsuits at the courthouse was so destructive, so harmful. And by that time I had been doing it over 20 years, and I realized like, I don't want any part of this anymore.
Yeah.
You know, when I started as a lawyer, I thought divorce was something that we just all had to do. We wanted to end a marriage, and that's just the way to do it. And I thought I was just serving in a kind of a needed capacity. But by the end of it, I realized, no, there's other ways to do this, and this is just awful. I can't imagine a worse thing to do with a family who wants to transition than go to court, you know?
Yeah.
What are the alternates that you came upon after going through that?
What
are the alternates you came upon specifically? I mean, this is like a sideline to what we plan to talk to you about today. But yeah, to divorce a court and to family court and that type of thing, what are some better options?
Well, a distant way away is in the Netherlands. They don't even have any court or lawyers in their divorces. They literally just, and they don't understand our system. They're like, why would you hire someone and pay money to fight with your lover? And it does. And when you think about it, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at my clients and thinking, you used to sleep with him. Like, why are you giving me all of your savings right now to try to kill him?
Right.
You know, this is the last person you've wanted, and this is the father of your children.
Right.
So there's other systems where they don't even use court for splitting up in custody. And then in America, at least we have some things now like conscious uncoupling, which is, I went and got certified in that, which is an actual methodical process to take couples through breaking up in a way that brings everyone up to a higher level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I think
then you can go to court and you can just fill the paperwork out. You don't need a lawyer, you know, because once you agree with how things should be with your partner, it's done. It's just paperwork. It's just a couple $100 and a couple documents.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you had to take the long way to get to that conclusion.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Mercedes was like divorce stuck out to her. Kink stuck out to me. So I'm curious what's an example of like maybe a mild kink and then like the one, like an extreme kink?
Okay. That's a great question. I love talking about it. Kink to me is a non-normative sexual excitement. And to me, that's a really broad range. And so one thing I don't like is how kink gets so pigeonholed into just like kind of one look, like with a certain kind of outfit and one kind of activity, which involves a lot of pain. A lightweight kink might be something like submitting or dominating or a power exchange that just has to do with, let's say, dinner. You know, you can be at dinner and enter into a 1 hour long power exchange and just have one person be the one who everything is going to be for that hour. And the other person, if they want to agree to submit to what's asked of them, there you go. You're actually having a kink dynamic because you're in power exchange.
I was going to say, is kink always revolving around sexual polarity or that type of power struggle?
You know, it's funny because most kink involves a power exchange.
Okay.
Not all kink is sex necessarily. The way I do it, it is. But some people engage in kink in ways like, for instance, tying rope. There are lots of people who play with rope and it may not end in a sexual episode.
Okay.
But they got aroused during the rope play. The more, where did you use, Jade? Deeper,
kink.
Drastic kink?
Oh, minor and more extreme. Maybe.
Yeah, more extreme kink is definitely what I would think of would be more edge play. And when people say edge play and kink, they're actually usually talking about on the edge of your life.
Oh,
so things that
like you could die.
Like if it went too
more
far,
extreme.
you could die.
Yeah, it's more extreme. Goes into that category.
I feel anxious.
So when you get into edge play, you want to be like very, very careful who your partner is. What's going on and how you're going to play with that.
So you have to feel really safe first as a core, or maybe you don't. I don't know. Like,
maybe you like not the feeling of it being unsafe. Yeah.
I assume both ways.
Yeah, that's such a cool thing. And it's kind of amazing until you try it. It's hard to imagine. What I found is that it's amazing how many things that I can feel are real when I'm in a role play. That's what kind of amazes me. So we can set up a safe environment and a safe container and with safe agreements. And I know my partner's going to be safe and we have all these really safe agreements with one another. But within that safe container, I can dive down into a role play that I'm not safe. And it is amazing how much my body and my psyche can learn and go through the real, seemingly real experience of being unsafe.
It's interesting. Mercedes and I have gotten a handful of emails over the years with job offers. And some of them, there was a guy I remember that emailed us once asking if we would beat him up. Like it was a turn on for him. And with each bone we broke, he'd give us $1,000. I don't know if you remember this, Mercedes, like a decade ago.
There's some strange ones that have come through.
Yeah. I mean, there's the usual, like, will you pee on me? This type of stuff. It's like the common stuff. But that one always stuck out to me. And I remember the night I got this email, I cried myself to sleep because I thought, what happened to this poor man that he wants to get beat up to feel arousal? And I was and my roommates were like, get over it. Let the man be turned on. Like, leave him alone. Let him have his fetish, his kink. But I think I was only like 26 at the time, but I think at the time I kind of felt like, because of sexual shame, maybe, that if you had kinks or fetishes like that something bad must have happened to you, basically.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I don't play in a way that there's any permanent damage, of any kind. And with that guy, perhaps he really meant it. Perhaps he was getting off on the role play of it,
Just going that extreme with
imagining
all like that. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
We were also curious how you got your interesting name.
Yeah.
Oh, my interesting name comes from the Tao.
Okay.
And are you guys familiar with the Tao Te Ching, the Tao and all that? In high school, I got so lucky and had a philosophy course in high school and got exposed to a lot of different ideas. And I really loved the Tao the most back then. And I still really do as a spiritual, which is follow nature. And the Tao is also known as the way. And the way, another synonym for that, is the river.
Okay.
So my name is River.
Oh, so your first name is not River by birth. I figured River was your birth name, and then you just added Roaring.
And Roaring was a nickname I got in Toltec circles.
Okay. How
and
cool.
So my legal last name is Del Yon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I like it. It's hard to say fast, though. River Roaring, River.
Yeah, especially for me. I struggle with R's. So also, your job descriptions are all very intriguing, but most listeners probably haven't heard of some of them before. Could you explain what a surrogate partner does, as well as a conscious uncoupling coach?
I'd love to. Conscious uncoupling coach is a little bit simpler in a way, that we literally guide people through a beautiful, deep, soul-searching process to uncouple from your partner in a way that allows you to drop the old patterns that were no longer serving you and come into a totally new way of looking at the whole relationship and yourself, so that you can really get that confidence and that vision and intention for your future with or without the person. A lot of people feel like conscious uncoupling is a breakup process, which it kind of is tailored to that. But I know a lot of people who've consciously uncoupled and then gotten back together, because what they did was they dropped all the old unhealthy patterns and then they realized they still wanted to be together. So that was really cool. The surrogate partner is really where my heart is. And I do that most. That's the thing I do the most, one-on-one with people. And a surrogate partner is a substitute partner. And so the program was designed by Masters and Johnson back in the 50s, but it's been modernized quite a bit. And it's designed for people who are in sex therapy and they're chatting with their sex therapist about their issues. But for some reason, they're really not able to get out there and practice all the solutions with other, with partners. A lot of times they have intense social anxiety. And a lot of times I have like super late life virgins who just have no experience and they feel frozen and unable to get out there and get a partner. So with their therapist and them, I step in as a substitute partner. And I literally teach them all the skills of intimate partnership, from communication to emotional expression, all the way through into sexual expression, and take a person who was formerly unable to get into a partnership and hopefully turn out a person who is a wonderful lover and partner and can teach others how to be wonderful lovers and partners. It's really the most satisfying one-on-one work I do.
Wow.
That's
really touching to see. I mostly work with men, and it's really...
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I have had some women clients, but it is mostly men who seek this out right now. And I've seen such gorgeous transformations, all the way from their posture changes, usually their careers change and their career starts taking off, and everything about them changes. They have changed the way they dress, the way they walk. it's just so beautiful to see.
So how does that work? What are some of the techniques you use in that work? Is it about, stroking their ego to a certain degree and allowing them to feel finally safe around a female, or to feel like they could approach someone to potentially have, be able to court somebody, something like that, just for the beginning stages? What does it look like?
Well, I guess you may have heard about the Wheel of Consent, which is another workshop I offer, and I think Peter talked about it. So I take the clients through the Wheel of Consent first, one-on-one. And the Wheel of Consent is a way of learning about yourself and your body's desire, and how to listen to your body's desire and follow that, not your mind.
Okay.
Now, most of us are used to thinking about sexual desire as something that is in our mind. Like, oh, when I think of sex, I think of all these either porn scenes, or I think of a look that I like.
I wonder why we're conditioned that way.
Well, our whole culture's built on the mind, right?
Yeah.
So, and it shoves out sexuality, and it certainly suppressed the body and embodiment and sexuality all at once. So it's not a surprise that when we come and try to do sex, we're all caught up in our minds, because that's all we're given. And so, unfortunately, that's not where sexuality lives. So you have a lot of people trying to connect with these like mental images of sexuality. It's not even where it lives anyway. So there ends up being no connection at all. So the Wheel of Consent allows a person to really find the desire that's inside their own body. A lot of the social anxiety and performance anxiety also that men feel is really based on a lot of monkey mind. It's really based on just a lot of worrying and a lot of thought about what they should be doing and what other people are.
That's true.
And it's what the whole external world is putting on them as pressure. And so I let them let go of all the external world and focus in on your own body and find out what you love and want, and then find really clear, safe ways to express that and get that. And when any human finds that in themselves, they become very sexy. And very confident.
Yeah, I could use this work on myself.
And so how does it work when it comes to the sexual acts? How do you coach them in that? Or do you?
Yeah, we sure do. And the Wheel of Consent, again, it's like a base to start from, because in that we learn the 4 beautiful ways of touch that Betty Martin outlines. And we learn to figure out who it's for when we're touching. So when we can learn things by touching each other's hands that actually completely make sense in the bedroom when things are hot and heavy, even in a multi-person orgy, the same principles apply. Okay. So one thing I like to point out is, like, a lot of times in our current culture, the typical way, say in Austin, Texas, you got tons of one-night stands happening. I'm sure there are like 100,000.
The number one dating city in America.
Yeah, everywhere. And what's typically going on is, let's say man and woman, the man gets together with the woman and they go back to someone's home, and suddenly both of them want to get out their best moves that they've ever learned, right? Yeah. And show the other one the cool moves they've got. And the man is actually, contrary to popular belief, usually really trying hard to figure out how to please the female and push her buttons and, get her happy. And the female is usually in service to the man, trying to make sure that everything is cool there. And so what you have is 2 people interacting with touch, and nobody has their own desire in the mix. And so you have 2 people trying to like please one another, and therefore nobody's desires being met at all. And it causes a lot of conflict and friction, and also a lot of awkwardness and confusion, right? Because it's awkward.
Yeah.
And so a couple of things we talk in the Wheel of Consent is, number 1, the most important thing is knowing, who is this for? So let's just say, like, Jade, if I'm going to enter into a touch with you, who is it for? We need to know that. If it's for me, then I don't want to hear from you other than your limit. So anytime I hit a limit of yours, I want to know that. And in the Wheel of Consent, the limit is known when anything in your body clenches up, when you're no longer giving from an open heart. So if I were going to be touching Jade, it would be like, Jade, may I touch you for 5 minutes? And whenever you start to clench up or close down in any way and you're no longer giving with an open heart, will you let me know?
Okay.
as long as we have that agreement, I can have freedom to do what I really want to do. Now, if I said, Jade, now can I touch you for you? And if she did say yes, then what would I do?
What would you do?
Yeah, what would I?
Jade would have to tell you.
What most people think is like, this is where I'll get out all my cool moves. And I'll show the other person how I can do things to them that make them so excited because I'm doing it for them. But in the wheel of consent, what we say is, actually, you don't have a fucking idea what the other person wants until you ask them. So if I said, Jade, can I touch you for you? And she did say yes, I'd say, great, what would you like? Yeah, so we rarely have those kind of pure interactions in the typical sex world, right?
That's true.
And so,
that's really true. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can learn that on hands and with clothes on, but then when we get, because when we get naked or we start touching genitals or we have more people involved, then the intensity rises. And it's a lot harder to stay in our internal practice when the intensity rises. And so we want to learn these principles in really safe places.
Right.
You know, like
I wonder if massages are a good way to practice, because it's almost like you have to tell them how much deep tissue you want and what part of your body needs it the most, you know?
Well, that is one possible way to practice. In a massage scenario, you're usually, it's, even though I'm getting a massage and it's for me, I'm usually handing over a lot of the expertise to them because they're trained in some technique, right? So I'm like, it's for me, but do what you do.
Right.
But
it takes a lot of work on the person's part that's receiving as well, because they've got to be able to voice all that. For me, that's the scariest thing you've said so far, is having to ask for what you want. And that's probably a big PCC in your work. Getting people to be comfortable with that is a major effort. Especially, do you see it more in women than men, that being an issue?
Actually, no, it's even.
Okay.
It's interesting how the culture works differently on the two genders, but that is even. In the Wheel of Consent, one of the practices we do is I put up on the board, why don't we ask for what we want? Just do it right now. Like, what are some reasons, just a few reasons that we don't ask for what we want?
Because we're afraid that we won't get it, and then we'll feel ashamed about asking in the first place.
We'll feel rejected, not valued.
Yeah. Any other reason?
All shame.
Maybe also there's something, for me, I think I'm worried I'll seem selfish, right? Like I'm there to serve. I feel a pressure to be there for what I can give and not what I can take.
That's a common reason.
Or what if we ask for the thing and then it doesn't give us the satisfaction we were hoping it does, and now I don't know what that means at the end of that sentence, but
yeah, that's another great common reason. There are so many reasons. And then we go through
Or some of us just expect them to already know, right?
That's true.
Yes. And so then that's what the next question is, what do we do instead of asking?
We just don't ask, and then we just hope they figure it out somehow or another.
Exactly. So then that might turn into pouting.
But it's also, I think, why men, we've said it before, why men don't ask us what we like, because they feel a pressure to already know, because we put that pressure on them. Like, you should already know what I want, what I need.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, toxic masculinity.
Exactly.
We're breeding it into the men.
So if we can set these scenarios up more, then each person can practice finding their own desire and getting what they truly, deeply want. And another thing I love that you said, Mercedes, is that I don't know of anything more vulnerable or scary than asking for what I want. And especially when we get in the bedroom. Because if I go down into my truest, deepest desires, it might freak someone out.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, that is very scary and risky to give that other person what I want. Because now they're really going to know me and see me. They may run screaming. They may judge me. If I'm in a long-term relationship, I may risk the relationship.
We recently recorded with a guest that brought up the Gottman cards, and they're sex questions. And it's makes it, even though it is kind of a sacred talk, it kind of makes it a more casual way to talk about what turns you on.
Yeah, it's a helpful tool for having that discussion. But for me, I think too, it's about like I've asked for things I wanted before, and I've taken that vulnerable step and, found a safe feeling time to ask for those things, and then ask for them and they don't happen. So then you feel this like floating rejection, that every time you're in the circumstance where it could be where I want it to happen and it's not, now it's like, do I have to ask again during sex or during the time when that would be where I want it to happen? And it becomes, now I'm like just always on the verge of rejection because it's not happening. So I'm feeling this floating rejection. Does that make sense what I'm saying here at all?
Well, what it seems like is you've asked, it either the person either said no or ignored it or somehow didn't give it to you.
Mhm.
And then it just feels like maybe it's one of those like, well, I don't want to do that again.
Yeah, no, and it's the conversation is always open-ended where it's not like a hard no. It's not like there's never a no. It just doesn't actually happen. So that's, you know, and I'm sure that happens. Guys probably listening have the same ideas. You know, they've got their own ideas of things they want that don't end up happening. And it's not even, I don't like if I put myself in this position and someone asks me, hey, I want to try this thing or I want to do this thing. And then we get into a circumstance where it could happen. If they don't prompt me then I probably will stay in my comfort zones and like do the things that I'm interested in. But I think if you do, like you were saying earlier, if you set aside time for you and your partner to like do this trade of who's going to dictate what's happening, you know, to the person that's getting the pleasure happening for them at the moment, and then swap that so everybody gets a fair equal amount of time, that could be a good way to walk that into your relationship.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's so true. Even after all these years of what I've been doing, I still sometimes set the timer with lovers just for
wow.
just for games like that. Like, let's just do this for 20 minutes both ways just for fun. And crazy stuff comes out.
Yeah. Like, because it's like a game and you got to try something new and try something different, you know, whatever you've been thinking about, but not really like conjuring the energy to really put it out there yet.
Exactly.
So when you were mentioning that when you first in 2005, 2006 or whatever it was, when you typed into Google, you know, Austin kink, and you noticed that your kinks did not even hold a candle to anything else that was going on out there. Would you tell us what your kinks were at that time?
Oh, I have no problem with that. I was going to say, well, they're still there. They've added a lot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my situation that I've fantasized about I've literally never had a fantasy that wasn't kinky to this day, ever, from the minute I can remember.
Man, I feel so plain Jane.
You may be surprised if you look closer at yours. I don't know. But
they all involve Ruby Rose.
I've heard you mention her. She's so funny.
I know.
I'm going to watch myself if I shouldn't cuss on this.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I'll put illicit on it. Don't worry.
Oh, I've always had a fantasy that I am submitting to an authority figure who, you know, and I do things for them out of curiosity and desire that I couldn't otherwise express myself, but they're suggesting I do things that I really do want to do. So I've never had a fantasy where I was cut up or hurt or beat or flogged or whipped. Not really involving pain at all. I've learned to really enjoy some sensation play with pain a lot, but mine are psychological. My desires have to do with a devotion and worship kind of atmosphere a lot of times. And so if like, even when I play, sometimes someone be like, well, tie me up. I'm like, no, you keep your hands there. You know, like you should, I want you to want to do what I say and do it because you're going to do it because you want to. You know what I mean? I don't need to have to tie you.
Yeah, that's very psychological, not so physical.
I use a few toys, but my more interesting place is psychological.
Yeah, I get that. So I wonder too that, you know, Jay just said she feels like a plain Jane, but we all have different starting points, you know, and I wonder, do you see any kind of pattern or psychology to the way that people come to you as clients, maybe where you can see that their starting point was kind of almost predictable because they came from this background, whereas someone who might be more, you know, extreme with their fetish or their kink came from a totally different upbringing, domestications.
It's a good question.
You know, to being this way now.
That's a great question. Yeah. What I have seen is that our kink fantasies they're actually like symbols, and our kink fantasies are kind of like nighttime dreams.
Okay.
You know, and you know how when you have a nighttime dream, they can seem kind of confusing to reality, but there may be many people who could help you interpret that toward different parts of your reality. So in other words, I have never seen a direct just a line drawn between like, you had this kind of childhood, you have this kind of fantasy. It's more of a puzzle to start unwinding and inquiring into what the deeper themes are in the fantasies and how they might relate.
Yeah.
In the workshops that Peter and I are doing right now, Erotic Foundations 1 and 2, we're going into the work of The Erotic Mind by Jack Moran, the book. and the wheel of consent. And in that book, Jack Morin, he really has an intriguing idea, which is that we can heal ourselves through our peak sexual experiences, and that some of our fantasies are symbols of our most painful emotional challenges as children.
Wow.
Eroticized. And when I think of, for instance,
and so being able to do those is healing, is what you mean? Okay.
Like we've had this very difficult emotional challenge as a child, and then not directly in a super linear way that's really simple to understand, but if we look at it long enough, we can see how it kind of twisted into this like a nighttime dream way of changing into eroticizing the opposite of that pain.
And in this sense, we have control over it, whereas we didn't the other time. Yeah,
exactly. So now, like, for instance, I can enter into a situation where I'm dominated in real life, and I agree to do it with a partner who I have all these safety measures around, right? And it may seem like I'm giving up my power, but it can be an act of power to put myself in a vulnerable position through my own power and my own agreement. And I know exactly when I can stop it when I say it stops. And so I'm taking power over the vulnerable position that I may have used to feel as a child and just cried over it and collapsed.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So when you do that, let's say you're working through, by the way, is there any better reason to work through your traumas besides like finding your kinks and then going after them? I like that as motivation.
I have a more fun healing method.
I'm over here trying to tell people to journal. There's like
That's funny.
little motivation behind that compared to your way of doing it, River. But I was wondering if as we use a tool like that to work through these maybe traumas, I want to call it. I don't know if that's too extreme of a word. Sometimes maybe it's not extreme enough. But as we work through these places that are from our past and hold some sort of turbulence for us, does the kink that held that trauma or wanted, our subconscious was trying to work through that trauma through, does it begin to recede at all? Or is it an always kink? Is it a perpetual kink?
That is a really beautiful question. And through my own life experience and in also hearing from other people, who've had the same kind of thing, they say, I went into this kink world, like I said, way back then, and I acted that role out over and over in, slightly different variations. I acted that one out for years, actually, in different variations. And it was thrilling, it was totally thrilling. And then I believe it did start to dissipate a bit.
Okay.
And the thrill of it. And now that I've found the Jack Morin book, I do believe that I can also, remember I told you I found my spirituality at the same time. So I was developing my spiritual life also at the same time. And so I believe that both through opening and cleaning my energy with Heather Ash, as well as living out this fantasy over and over, I was healing on both sides. And that it's kind of because I stand right now in a different relationship to those old past wounds.
Yeah.
That I now stand in a different relationship to that exact scene in kink. And it will always be a home base for me.
Right.
Like there are certain things you can do that just get me turned on in 1 minute if it's done well.
Right.
And I've also, it's almost like it got a chance to happen over and over. I lived it out. I've explored it.
Right.
And it's like it opened a door to allow new things in.
For sure.
So then I went down and had a whole new road of new fantasies came in,
Yeah, I get it. No,
yeah. And so it's just like a journey, a constant journey to explore, whoa, I wonder why I'm having that desire now. That is wild. And I wonder what that ties back to.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's like reaching, a goal in a video game, and then it unlocks a whole new world after that, in a sense. But it's really cool that you can tie it to healing. And I think even because a lot of the time intimacy is partnered, and it involves another person, that if you can find a way to know the person you're with psyche, be open enough to talk about the kink and figure out how they relate, it's probably a really cool place to hold the type of therapy that you're doing. I mean, you're doing this work, essentially. You're breaking into the psyche by using sexuality, and it's really beautiful. So I love it.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to become obsessed. Look what's happening right now. Your original kink was your gateway drug, and then once pop, you just can't stop, I guess. Want to talk to you about what exactly it means to be sex positive.
Well, now that word is, for me, Simply that I believe our sexuality is a positive life force. It's really kind of that simple. In today's world, the people in my circles who I'm around, that's a given.
Okay.
It's just like, duh, I know that. But
Yeah.
it doesn't take far for me to find people who wouldn't agree with that, such as my mother.
Right.
Mhm.
You know, so there are, I think it just is a division between people who see sex as scary and awful and a sin. That's not sex positivity. And so simply saying sex positive is people who agree that it is a positive force and are interested and open to talking about it.
And how do you think that we are held back, like through society shaming our sexuality, specifically for men and women in different ways?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. If it's okay, I would really love to talk about men on this one.
Okay.
And because I do not value men more than women, but I do believe that women's issues are currently now finally being discussed more. And I'm glad.
We've had a microphone for a little while. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad, and we're not done, but I do look over toward men now at this moment in time, and I have a lot of empathy for their situation. And so this is how I see our society harming men. If you don't mind me going on a little thing here, I'll try to kind of give you the quick pieces, and you can decide if you want to talk about anything of that I'm going to say a little more.
Okay.
I just want to also just set the stage for this, because I have no idea what you're about to say, but just the energy I'm feeling from what you're about to say. Yeah. We, on this podcast specifically, you know, Jade and I have been models for a long part of our career. So of course we've attracted a lot of eyes from men. So they have been a big support system in our lives, and finding a way to bridge the gap between what's happening in the world right now with the feminist movement, the Me Too movement, and everything like that, but also understanding that men are going through this transition with us and need to be supported in all of what's happening there is a really important part of the show. So
and I didn't mean like I didn't mean that we didn't deserve the mics that we have. I just meant like the whole Me Too movement. We've been able to speak our voice a lot in this last year, and it's done some good and some bad. I'm really, really glad that, you know, that movement has happened. But I do think that probably what you're about to say.
We're just projecting everything.
I'll just let you start talking.
We're looking over the edge
before I say something wrong.
You know, because I'm totally anti-patriarchy, but what that actually, I believe patriarchy has harmed men in exactly as much as women. It's actually harming everybody. And so this is how I think we treat men. And I'm going to talk about the United States of America because that's the only country I really know. This is what we do. First of all, the day after they're born, we cut the most sensitive part of their genitals off for no reason. And
can
there's going to be probably a lot of people debating that, but we would not tolerate genital mutilation of females in the United States.
Right.
And I'm teaming up with Morgan Taylor to present a movie screening of American Circumcision on February 7th.
I'm really passionate about that.
I'll
help you promote that.
We've got to get real about what that does to a child traumatically, pre-verbally, and that is the most sensitive part of their entire bodies. If you look at nerve ending count per square inch, that is insane. Okay. And so we cut their sensitive part off. And now today I heard a complaint. Men aren't sensitive. And I get really mad. Okay. That's number one. That's the starting of their life. Then after that, we don't apologize for that. There's never a time later where we're like, I'm sorry. Did you really want that? That's never acknowledged, which just like what trauma does is when it's unacknowledged, it just stays there and builds and sits and festers and creates problems, right? But here's my big one. I have never heard anyone else talk about this, but it's just driving me crazy. After that, as soon as they can understand language, we tell little boys, don't show your boner in public. So do not have an erection 99% of your life. So you can't have it in school, church. Really don't do it at home if mom doesn't want to see it. Don't do it even with a girlfriend until it's just that magic time. Don't let your body have its natural movement and motion, and don't do that. And so I don't think we realize that when we hold their body down, we hold their emotions and their thought processes down as well. Because a man is going to try to interpret that as, I can't feel aroused. 99% of my life. So like I can go to the grocery and be totally juiced up, and which I do. And I can live juicy, you know, and I can go just be like, love how the butterflies look and the wind feels on my skin and feel really turned on all day long. But a guy, 99% of his life does not have that. And I am getting really burned up about that, because then we turn to men and criticize them. Oh, where's your erection? During this 1% of the time when you're supposed to have it immediately at attention.
Right.
So
I
I'm
didn't think
calling
about that.
erectile dysfunction cultural dysfunction, because we're the ones telling them to have a very unnatural, very unhealthy relationship to their erection, which is not just their body, but it also is part of their emotional life. We criticize men for not having emotions. We won't let them. And it just burns me up. Boner shame burns me up.
Yeah.
I literally have never heard any other human talk about it.
So I have two questions. So I'm curious, because I understand the boner shame part. I completely do. But so for me, I was molested growing up. And so I don't live in the fear, but I'm super sensitive to my kids saying sexual things or doing sexual things, because I don't know where they learned that from. Was there a predator that said this to you? So the other day, my son asked if we could have a private parts party, and it scared the crud out of me, because I thought, that sounds like something a predator would say. Who said that to you? And so I'm trying to find the balance of I don't want him to not feel comfortable in sexual sayings or with his body parts. But my initial reaction was, who asked you to have that? What do you think happens at that? Like to ask questions. So I'm trying to find the balance, to let him, I feel it's a little bit hard when you come from a background that I do, because you just get so startled by that, because you want to protect your kids and make sure that nothing, but you also want them to feel free in their sexuality and in their expression. So him having an erection doesn't, I'm just like, it's nothing. We don't we don't make a big deal about it, but something like that, I have a hard time not making a big deal of, because it scares me. So.
And where had he found out about that? That's a pretty big word for a little kid.
He said he made it up. And I asked, well, what do you do at private parties? And he was like, we dance and watch what our privates do. So I don't know if he's just creative, but it scared the heck out of me.
I can see why, Jade. Yeah, I can see why. And actually, I've had women, more than one, many women tell me that they don't want to be around an erection for several reasons. A lot of women feel like if there's an erection, that's a signal that they have to do something, that it's like like a demand. And I think, gosh, that's sad. But if we don't start coming to terms with the erections, we're never going to get over these false concepts of what they mean. Like if a guy has an erection, he did not say you need to do something about it. If he says you need to do something about it, then he said you need to do something about it. But just having the erection, we need to get more comfortable with our natural body movements. And I don't see how we're going to overcome either side of gender's sexual issues without dealing with some of these things. I don't see how we expect men to perform after all that beating down.
Right.
And then there are more examples. Like this woman had this beautiful video online where she was talking about how, have you heard that phrase, men always want sex?
No.
I mean,
it sounds like a phrase.
I figured, but
I've heard that so many times. Like men always want sex. Men always want sex.
I heard that they, like a statistic that they think about it like every 7 seconds or something like that.
Yeah. Well, for me, I heard that phrase and really didn't think much of it. I just kind of moved on in life. Like, oh, I guess whatever. I guess they do. But this woman pointed out that is a very damaging phrase. What gender flip that? Would we accept people saying women always want sex? And does that even allow them to have consent? Or are they just always wanting it? And doesn't that even block the idea of them ever being raped? Because they could never be raped if they always wanted. And also she was pointing out how a lot of times women will walk up and just feel all over men and just, like, oh, I love your muscles. Oh my goodness.
Your bald head. Like, it's a bald head.
Well, you always want sex. I'm sure you love this.
Right.
But that's not fair. And if we gender flip all of that, that's really a rape culture.
I also the other question I had was about circumcision. So I know that our culture believes it's for sanitation purposes, and that from what I know, religious and sanitary, that's the argument I hear the most is sanitary. It's sanitary. It's for, so you don't get infection, hygiene. But I know that it's now considered cosmetic in most states, which is amazing because that means maybe we're, going in the right direction. But the argument I hear too is just that, well, the father's circumcised and we don't want him to feel different. And I was reading that by the time, like, for my kids are 3 and 4, by the time they're in high school, it's really going to be 50-50 because of the cosmetic switch. And so that's a huge relief. But I was not aware when I gave birth to my son, I was not aware and not as conscious as I am now of the situation and all of I just didn't have all the knowledge, and I just let his dad decide. But my son's circumcision was really traumatic. His dad was supposed to go with him. It wasn't a good situation in the hospital. He didn't end up going with him, so that my son went. And I had a very traumatic pregnancy, a lot of anxiety and depression. So I'm sure he already had a rough start to his emotional side of his life, but they took him to get a circumcision. They did it wrong, and they said that they'd be right back. So much time went by, and I had a C-section, so I couldn't even get up. And so they finally come in over an hour later, when they said it would be like 20 minutes. Over an hour later, they come in and they say, we're not going to be able to bring him back in here. He's still freaking out. He's still too worked up. He's only 2 days old. And they're like, he's still too worked up. We're going to continue to try to calm him down. And they said they're going to have to redo it also. And so this to me was like, I was bawling because I just thought, what a rough start to your life, that like you're taken out of your mother's belly through an emergency C-section, and then you're snipped. Like, they don't numb them or anything. Like, you're just snipped in the most painful place. And so this has been something that I've beat up myself on for 4 years now. It's my biggest regret in parenting. I cry every time I read about it. And so I'm curious because every time I post about it, dozens of mothers are like, me too. I cry about this too. I'm so sad. What can we do? Not necessarily so that we can feel better, but so that we can feel like we're undoing that damage. Is there anything
right now?
Yeah, talking about it.
I think Mercedes is right. I mean, that's it, is to raise the awareness for others. And I really empathize with you, Jade. And I hope, like,
when my son gets hurt, he panics. And I'm always like, oh, it's PTSD from what I've done to you. I removed a part of your body. And I feel like I always have to apologize to him, which I know that's so confusing. So I don't, but I just wondered if there was something we could do for them individually.
How aware you are. And if I were in your shoes, one thing I would consider is really just, and I know, Jade, that you have done so much research on trauma and healing, and to really be with your son in those moments, because we can heal through trauma. You know that, right? And so your awareness to why he might be having the trauma and being there with him as I'm sure you know many techniques for healing trauma, being with a person calmly, giving them your presence, letting them know you're there, it's safe. So I think just as we would with anyone who has trauma, I have trauma from the past, just they have trauma too, and we need to be with them every second to heal them. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine what a great mother you must be. But I think as we would with every child, that every child's going to have traumas. We need to be there with them, hear them, let them have those emotions that may be stuck in their bodies, and then raise the awareness for other mothers and fathers, because it's surprising how few people, I think, are really aware.
I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Luckily, most of my friends' kids are not circumcised, so it is becoming a little bit more the norm. Maybe it's just the group I'm around. But I read something on your site about how circumcision also affects women sexually. And I don't think, I had never heard that. And I don't think many people have. So could you share that?
Oh, I was hoping
you know what I'm speaking of.
Okay. Important. I think that's so important. It was fascinating to me too. So the uncircumcised penis is a piece of skin is over the tip of the penis, and the penis was designed to have a mucous membrane on the tip, which means that it would be just like the inside of our mouth or something. It would have mucus, and that covering of skin over it protects that sensitive mucus area and keeps it moist. And the reason it has the mucus and the covering over it is because that's the most sensitive part. So it's protected until it's needed for something like sex. And then the skin rolls back a bit and this very sensitive part comes out. When that's cut off, then this mucus tip dries up and loses sensitivity. And so the part that we usually see on the tip of a cock is that the circumcised, that's dry skin, was supposed to be much, much more sensitive and covered. And now the part for the woman, when the man is covered with the skin there, and then when he inserts into her, then the skin pulls back and the mucousy, soft, juicy part of him would enter her. Doesn't that sound like kind of comfortable compared to,
Right.
I mean, I'm trying to not get turned on right now.
It's like this gentle, soft thing that comes inside you. And then not only that,
pre-lubricated.
It's lubricated.
Yeah.
And then the skin that's there is designed to literally stroke the G-spot while the intercourse is happening in and out. And so then women having the ejaculatory G-spot orgasms used to be a very common thing. And now it's like some kind of freak show. So
yeah, you don't really hear of women squirting anymore. I feel like I never hear that. And that's what you, on your site, it says that was one of the things that causes a woman to squirt is that.
This skin is designed to allow that kind of orgasm. And if you had a G-spot orgasm, it's a completely different experience than just the clitoris orgasm. And that was supposed to be available to us and want to make us have sex. So we'd have the babies.
Yeah.
And now you have men being literally put down by women and others saying like, don't just pound me, don't just come here because that hurts.
And you also hear women, like there was that movie Bad Moms where they made fun of an uncircumcised penis. Like we're making fun of their natural state,
Yeah. And that would actually feel better for us and be more healthy for us and them, because that mucous membrane also is very protective, of many things. So it would be a completely different experience. And it's really sad to me that because of all this circumcision, the act of penis and vagina intercourse is actually nothing like what it was designed to even be anymore.
I wonder why so many men are so firm on their stance of circumcision.
Well, if they're already cut, then they don't want to say that the other way is better because now they feel inadequate.
That's true.
It's true. And I actually feel pretty interested in that question because I think that is holding back progress. But I totally agree with you, Mercedes. I was thinking like, whoa, what if I actually was a man who was cut? That's a lot to deal with.
Yeah. And having a son, you don't, your son's going to question that and you're going to have to convince. I mean, it's a whole thing that might, if a guy sat with that, they might realize it's revolving around their ego that's tied to their penis in some, way. I think a lot of it has to do though with the way women decide to voice their opinions on what they prefer and what our preferences come from are that idea of, oh, it's not hygienic to have an uncircumcised penis, or it looks funny, or, all these things that come probably from our religious backgrounds and trickled down into now our culture that's not really religious at this state in the game. I wouldn't say overall we're kind of a mixed bag. So yeah, we need to be the ones saying like, it's great either way. Let's leave it alone and let it be as healthy as possible. Always strive for healthy over anything else.
Yeah, intact. The intact.
Whole body. We like it.
Yeah, we like the whole natural body. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I guess also just for mothers too that have circumcised sons and they are now aware, I guess just really trying
about it too.
Yeah, but also like really encouraging that sensitive side in your son.
Yeah.
Since that is something that they lost, like maybe always just making that extra effort to encourage that sensitive side could be really healing for both the mother and the son.
Exactly. Taking, what you just named, Mercedes, I might call it toxic femininity.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? That's what I call it.
Yeah, because that's the shaming of the man.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so
I think when that happens in a female, I call it toxic masculinity in the female as well.
Okay.
Like she's essentially creating the toxic masculine. And because masculinity is an energy that we're just embodying in both, whatever sex you're born as, you can embody both. So when you're being toxic in a rigid way, you're being toxic masculinity, or you're embodying toxic masculinity. So it's kind of the same either way. I mean, just guys aren't the only ones who have toxic masculinity running through their body. It's all of us. It's a cultural thing, men and women both. So we're all breeding it. Let's turn this thing around, girls and guys. But yeah, Jade, I think that's an important note because I know how hard that's been for you. We've had this conversation a few times, just us together and with other guests on the show around this idea of circumcision and how to reframe our brains around that. And maybe it's too giving, like maybe is there a good time, you think, to bring that up with your child later in life? Like if you did circumcise
That's
your
a
child?
really good question.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I don't know.
fantastic question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't really honestly feel totally qualified on that one with kids, but
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I
I would
planned
look
on
for
it.
the teaching moment. I would look for the
The
teaching
teaching
moment.
moment.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you know what they say? Like
Yes.
when instead of having that one big sex talk, just constantly look for when they make a comment or an inquiry,
Yeah.
when it comes up in media.
That's
Just
true, because it's
so
coming.
so many things come up in media, and those are great opportunities to be like, "Hey, sweetheart, what did you think about that? What did you notice about that
Right.
scene?" Or even when there's domestic violence, like,
Mhm.
"Hey, what did you notice? What did you think about what he said and she said?" "Yeah, I didn't like that either." Really just
Mm,
they're exposed all the time to
Yeah.
these
yeah.
big adult ideas, and I think it's up to us to notice that and then go ahead and talk with them about it and explain a lot deeper of what's going on.
Yeah.
Mm.
Instead
But
of
they're
steer
seeing.
away from the question because we're afraid to answer it. I mean, I'm not a parent, so I can't even begin to, understand, but just in relationship with any person, it's like, when those topics come up, when you're just like, I don't want to deal with it, but you have to, because it's only going to get worse and bigger and cause a thing
Mhm.
between you. So, all right, ladies listening, and men, if you're a parent and you're dealing with this situation with a son of yours, we got your back. We'll support